Welcome, everybody. We're doing another episode of Indie Reads Loud. You know how excited I get when I have some of my favorite authors back on the program, almost as excited as I get about new authors on the program. And that's only because I know them so well. So today, M Samland is coming back again to read volume 3 of his Shiny series of short stories. And this is Vampires. So
Vampires.
in the wonderful synopsis that you have for the book, it says vampiric hijinks to soul-searching immortals. This volume takes you on an unforgettable journey where fangs meet funny, dread meets drama, and will you learn to appreciate the small nuances of eternal life. This is so perfect.
Well, that promises a lot. My goodness.
It really does. But I have faith in you, and I know that you're going to deliver on every one of those points in this collection. So, again, everybody in listener land out there, we have to remind you this is a collection of short stories where vampires appear prominently. So, if you have little ears that are sensitive to vampires, you might want to preview this first because vampires, you know. And if it's Halloween when you're listening to this, just dive right in because it'll be perfect. Jamie, why vampires? Out of all the immortal beings in the world, why vampires?
So actually, in Shiny 2, there were some vampire references in the second book, and the second book was supposed to be about holidays, and the vampires kept showing up. So I said, okay, do one about vampires, and then werewolves started to sneak their way into the story, and so actually there's a subplot between several of the stories in this one, which I hadn't done before in Shiny, where we see that there's a fracturing of the vampire werewolf alliance, and something more might be going on with that. But yeah, I just picked vampires because they can be represented so many different ways. They can either be sly and sexy, or they can be monstrous and and demons. They're fun. There's a lot of ways they're represented. But one thing that I did a little bit of research, and vampires historically never show up in mirrors because mirrors used to be made with silver in order to make them reflective, and they didn't react well with silver. Modern mirrors use aluminum instead, so modern vampires could use modern mirrors, I think. I'm going forward with that.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a logical leap.
Sure.
I'm still stuck on this. You were writing a holiday book and vampires showed up.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So I mentioned my squirrel brain a lot. So I was writing. I don't even remember what story it was, but writing these Shiny stories, I kind of just let my brain go and just kind of put words onto the page. And somehow a vampire ended up being on there. And oh no, I remember. I have a recurring character. He's the Detective McClackey. He's a detective. He's always 2 weeks from retirement, no matter what story he's in. He's been
Forever
in
in
several of
retirement.
my
Yeah.
recurring stories.
So
He's seen
close,
some.
but not quite there.
Oh yeah, he's seen some real horrors in what I've written for him, and in the second book, and I think I might have read this one, but he's at the lake house. Goes to a lake house, and he's ends up finding out that he has a vampire for a partner on the force. And so that vampire, I had another reference in that book, and then I thought, well, I'm just going to bring this vampire back, and then all vampires.
And then it just happened.
And it just happens. Yeah, the next Shiny
You
I'm
open the
looking at will be,
door. You open the
and then they
door
just
just
flood
a
in.
little bit, you
Yeah.
know. I have a
Well,
friend who used to say you let the nose of the camel into the tent and then you're all done after that.
and then you're all just covered in camel.
That's right. I'm super excited to hear about your vampire escapades. When you are ready, please take the
Okay.
microphone and read aloud.
All right. Speed date. This is one of the ones referenced on the back of the book. Samantha's coworker told her Noctum had an exclusive experience, but nothing would have quite prepared her for the unique atmosphere. Her eyes adjusted as she pushed through the tiny rubies of the beaded curtain, stepping into the dim lounge lit by extravagant crystal chandeliers with 1,000 tiny candles. Patrons filled the plush, dark velvet booths, and they all seemed to pause their murmuring conversation to glance her way. Their eyes flicked away just as quickly, their interest fleeting. Standing statuesque behind the podium, the maitre d' raised a single eyebrow at her. Do you have a reservation? Samantha glanced down at her black dress, just like the one dress the movies would make you think every woman owned, but no one did. She bought it off the rack 2 hours ago. The neckline seemed suddenly lower than it had in the shop's mirrors. I do, she finally replied. It's under Drake. Oh, an acquaintance of Master Drake. The man's eyes slipped over her before he traced a finger down the book in front of him. Miss Samantha Porter, it does not list your preference? Preference? Men, women, all, other? Oh, right. Samantha looked past the maitre d' to the well-dressed patrons. All, I suppose? Very good. He made a small note in his book and took a brooch from a basket beside it. Please put that on and follow me. He snapped the leather folio to his chest and turned with military precision. Samantha followed through the lounge, trying not to make eye contact with the others as she passed. They couldn't all be here for speed dating, right? Yet she saw a similar brooch pinned on everyone as she cut across to the booth on the far wall. The maitre d' waved her into the plush velvet and set the leather folio on the table before her. Your events will begin shortly, but might I suggest something from the bar to whet your appetite? Your server will be with you momentarily. Thank you. The man nodded and returned to his post. Samantha opened the menu, eyes scanning down the list of overpriced wines and cocktails before settling on the plasma punch. The description stated it would be cloudy whites, which would stand out nicely amongst everyone else drinking something red out of goblets. The waiter came. Samantha immediately forgot his name, and he returned a few minutes later with the drink. It allowed her just enough time to flip through the rest of the folio. Past the drinks was a set menu, then a short list of base rules for the speed date. And finally, a dozen blank pages, presumably for her to take notes on each match. Sipping the plasma punch, Samantha watched the others in the lounge. Some were alone, like herself, but just as many sat in pairs. She saw she saw more than one throuple. She'd never met her coworker Drake before, both working remotely for years, but he promised to set her up right if she ever went to Europe. She finally saved up enough money and PTO, and here she was, alone in a dim lounge in Milan, where everyone seemed to eye her with predatory hunger, about to take part in the speed dating. May I have your attention, said the maitre d' with a soft tap. We will begin momentarily. Please consult the rules of the evening once more and enjoy yourselves. Samantha sighed and opened the folio to actually read the rules. Number 1. Discreet interactions. Keep conversations to a tone quiet as to not be heard at other tables. Number 2, timeliness. Each round will last exactly 7 minutes. No more, no less. Number 3, strict privacy. No photographs, cell phones, autochrome, tintypes, or recording devices allowed. Number 4, no outside beverages. Number 5, anonymity. Refrain from giving any true names during your conversations. Number 6, ending ceremony. Chosen connections are to be submitted anonymously and will be announced at midnight. Number 7, quick departure. All unmatched individuals must leave immediately after midnight. Number 8, discretion. You will not discuss your interactions outside of this event. Samantha groaned. Midnight. That was well past her bedtime, especially as jet-lagged she was. Whatever, it was for one night, and if it was anything like speed dating she'd done back home, she'd leave with plenty of stories of dates. A bell chimed once, piercing through the low din of conversations. 2 waiters pulled aside the beaded curtain for 2 dozen well-dressed people filing in. Samantha leaned back against the velvet, watching the newcomer's eyes flit around the room, taking in the details. Obviously, none had been in a place like this before. Almost as one, they looked down, consulting scraps of paper in their hands before fanning out across the nocturne. A thin man wearing a dark blazer and jeans stopped next to her booth, consulting his paper once more and slipped in across from her. He ran a hand through his mop of black curls and adjusted his large, yellow-tinted glasses. Hello, my name's Lars, he said in a heavy Norwegian accent. Hello, Lars, I'm Samantha. He offered a hand. Lars took it, barely letting their fingers touch before his hands were back in his lap near the table. He glanced down, consulting the paper. Samantha, that's a pretty name. How do you like to spend your nights? Do you like quiet strolls or crowded bars or to stay in? Sorry, I can't do a Norwegian accent. Lars seems nice, but was in need of an edible to calm down. Depends on my mood and who I'm with, I suppose, she said, swirling her drink. hoping she came off as mysterious and flirty. Lars nodded and moved on to the next question. Do you have any dietary restrictions? Samantha choked back her drink so she didn't spray it. Do I what? I guess I don't like blue cheese. Lars nodded. Would you need to impose any dietary restrictions on me should we be a match? Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, Lars, dear. The bell dinged and Lars left, and a blonde woman in leather pants took his place. Beth introduced herself, and after the quick small bit of small talk, she asked Samantha if Samantha liked to travel. I don't know if your previous companions helped to arrange travel, but I have a great deal of experience, Beth said. Troy assured Samantha that he was great with technology and would love to help her set up any new devices she acquired, or to help with anything she had at home she was too nervous to turn on. Patty was exceptionally handy overall, with a broad set of skills and access to anything Samantha might need. Diego stressed his loyalty and discretion. The night couldn't come soon enough. When the maitre d' announced the end of the event, Samantha scanned through her notes, feeling like she spent the evening interviewing 24 people for a job rather than a date. What that job might be, she had no idea. The staff was moving across the club, collecting everyone's selections, but Samantha didn't want to see any of these weirdos again. Well, maybe Troy, but only because he had nice arms. And she couldn't get her MacBook to stop that annoying pop-up about Keystore something, I don't know. Did no one please you, madam? Asked the maitre d', frowning at her blank match sheet. She smiled up at him. No, to no fault of their own. I'm just in town for a couple days anyway. I do hope you enjoyed yourself. He pivoted and offered her a hand. The other gestured toward the door. Samantha took the hint, scooting from the booth. Definitely. I met some real characters. Can't wait to tell Drake all about it. The maitre d's nails dug into her elbow. She tried to pull away, but the grip was like iron. Let go, you're hurting me. I needn't remind you, Miss Porter, of the last rule of the evening regarding discretion. Yes, of course, she gaped again and released her, raking snails across her in the process. Shadows gathered around the man, and Samantha backed away towards the exit. Halfway there, when she dared tear her eyes from the waiter, she recognized Patty and Troy sitting down beside other people, snuggling close. Troy tilted his neck away from his match, an older man with a short gray beard, and he gasped as the man kissed his neck. The man pulled back, his breath later, chin dripping red, mouth wide to expose his long canines. Another patron ripped into her wrist, and Lars, another patron ripped into her wrist, and Lars, Samantha's first date of the night, wrapped his lips around it, greedily sucking. The patron sneered down at him, mouth wide, sharp fangs on display. This wasn't an ordinary speed dating in Milan. This was for, no, Samantha wouldn't let herself say it, or even think the word. She ran past the beaded curtain into the lobby. She saw the street lights beyond the windows, only 10 feet away. Shadows blotted out her freedom and safety just as she reached the door. She skidded to a stop as the maitre d' frowned down at her. His lips parted to let his fangs glisten in the meager light. Are you forgetting something, Miss Porter? He growled, gliding nearer. Between his fangs, his presence, or between his fangs, his presence, and what she's seen in the last room, there's no denying the word. Vampire. This was a den of vampires. Please, her voice failed, her words drifting to nothing. The maitre d' thrust something at her and pivoted for her to pass. She stared at the object for a half dozen frantic breaths before recognizing her clutch purse. Pleasant night to you, Miss Porter. Give Master Drake our greetings. Samantha didn't stop running until she was back in her hotel room with all the lights on. Ooh, so scary. Single mother. But I don't want Italian. We had Italian the last 3 nights. Lysandra took a deep breath, forcing herself, like all mothers must at some point, to remember that she loves her children. Eat or slumber without dinner, she warned her youngest, Alara. The girl groaned and rolled her eyes, but opened her mouth wide to sink her fangs into the neck of the unconscious delivery boy on the table. Without looking up from the man's outstretched wrists, her older brother, Lucian, made a face gleeful that his sister might get in trouble. Mother, he's making that face again, Lara moaned. Sara ignored the girl. Instead, she focused on the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down to sunrise. There was still almost an hour. When will father return? Lucian asked, dabbing a napkin at the corner of his mouth. My answer hasn't changed from last night. Vampiric council work can take a very long time. Is he building us a new home? Asked Lara. No, again, he's surveying locations for a new global headquarters. Her gaze returned to the clock, ticking down the moments. There was no danger for them within the house, but her third child. Sara heard the front door creak open, followed by a hushed conversation. Leaving the two younger children to finish their meal, she stormed through the hall's long dress, snapping in an otherwise unfelt breeze until she entered the grand foyer. Ancient woodwork framed the vaulted ceilings and walls, filled with family portraits and villages long forgotten. Wide stairs curved up to the second floor, where her eldest child was trying to creep. Dorian Alaric Valerius. The porter shuddered with her wrath. Dorian and his waifish date froze in place, turning to her. Hey, Ma, this is Sandra. Samantha, the girl corrected. No, the girl directed without irritation. You have a beautiful house, Mrs. The girl's words cut off as Sandra crossed the space between them in a blur, snapping Samantha's neck. Dorian, what have I told you about inviting humans into the house? Her son gaped at the body tumbling downstairs. What the heck, Ma? I liked her. No, you didn't. She was a human. Answer my question. Dorian's light leather jacket creaked under the stress as he crossed his arms. He thought, humans are for sharing. And what were you going to share? And were you going to share her, sneaking her up to your room? Come on, Ma. I'm almost 117. I don't care if you're the Grand Imperator Archduke himself. You live by my rules as long as you live in my house. Dorian looked down at the girl, her lifeless eyes staring through dark blonde locks. Can I still eat her? Sandra sighed, long and slow. Very well, but just this once. Take her to your father's study. Don't let the children see her. They'll want dessert. Hurry along. I need to get them in their coffins. She shooed her eldest, grinning only when his back was turned to pick up the girl. It's a little bit dark. A little bit dark story. Let me see. Grace and Lucy. We got time for this one. So the main character of this one actually is from a previous story in this book that stars Detective McClackey, my detective that is in all of these. But we just see this guy again. He's a snooper. The moving truck arrived late in the afternoon. I say Grace and Lucy. I've got something. Grace and Lucy. The moving truck arrived late in the afternoon. Two burly men hauling fabric-wrapped furniture to the freight elevator. They struggled and huffed with their bulky loads, which meant the stuff was quality, not some cheap composite wood from a department store. My new neighbors, taking the apartment across the hall and down the door, arrived as the movers were finishing, pulling up their black electric SUV with windows tinted to complete darkness. My father once told me that meant people were criminals having tinted windows. I'd like to think I'm a bit more open-minded. The two women stepped out as the parking lot's sodium lights were kicking on, one tall and lithe with flawless ebony skin, wearing a deep purple silk suit. The other was shorter, but by how her green dress followed her movements, I could sense her power and grace through my binoculars. They disappeared in the building's front door, and I rushed to my people, catching them as they exited the elevator. The shorter woman, perhaps Korean, pushed something into the mover's hand, and he brushed off with quick bows and exclaimed thanks. So, the new neighbors have money. How would that play out? Would they stay quiet to themselves, or would they demand the building renovations that I had been emailing them about for years? I watched them for weeks, always coming and going as a pair, always impeccably kept and dressed, always leaving or arriving just after dusk. I dedicated a new notebook, naming them Grace and Lucy. They never had food delivered, never brought home groceries. They entertained at least one different man a week, sometimes two at once. I'd watched the men knock and enter, but never saw them leave. Somehow they slipped my vigilance. I recorded their schedule, attempting to guess what work they might do, but after weeks, I could discern no pattern to their randomness. An obvious answer opened itself to me, like a lotus blossoming on a murky pond. These women were high-end art dealers, and obviously a lesbian couple, but that's beside me. It did raise a question about their string of mail followers. Perhaps that was a matter for the police. No, I stopped myself before dialing, not this time. Another week later, while I watched the parking lot, someone was knocking on the door down the hall. Knock, 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 20-second pause. Knock, 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 20 seconds. Then the knocking was closer. I'd have to email maintenance again about installing my fisheye people. The knockers finally came into view. Two young men in white sleeve button-up shirts and precise haircuts. They knocked across the hall, waited, knocked again, waited, then stooped to slide something under the door and turned to me. I made notes of their name tags as they knocked. A minute later, they slipped a pamphlet under my door, but I didn't look down as they moved on to Grace and Lucy. The door hinged open on their first knock. The young men shared a glance before taking a furtive step forward. One called out a greeting. The door clicked closed behind them as I lost sight of their backpacks. I admit to having my slips in my vigilance when we're watching the building. It is too grand a task for a single person, but I have done my best. I had no slips on my watch, waiting for those boys to emerge. Unless they escaped by a fire escape, or unless they exited by a fire escape by far side, or through a hole in the floor, those young men were still within the apartment across the hall and down one door. Even as Grace and Lucy met another 2 weeks worth of men into their home. I couldn't even guess at the term, but I began to wonder if these women were more than mere lesbians. They're vampires and they ate Mormons.
You have such an interesting imagination.
I like the idea of this person thinking that they are so open-minded. Obviously, they're not, but they are what they are. They're watching everything happen through their peepholes and binoculars.
I like your detective making sure that the neighborhood watch never fails.
Never. They were vigilant. Those boys are still with him.
Very fun. I also love in the second story how you really captured the nuance of a petulant teenager. It's just excellent writing. But Mom,
I'm 117 years old.
I love the line about the little kids wanting dessert.
Right.
That's the best. It's very fun.
I think that second one was one of the first ones that I wrote for Shiny 2 or Shiny 3 rather. Just the idea of it's called single mother, but there is a father somewhere. He's just not present to help out, and she is at her wit's end trying to keep the family in order.
Yeah. So what's up for you next? What happens after vampires?
So the Shiny book 4, I am debating between calling it Shiny Volume 4 Squirrels in Space, and I go more into a sci-fi theme, or I might call it Shiny Volume 5, The Search for Volume 4, which is an obscure Spaceballs reference, which I rather like.
That is very fun. Are there gonna be squirrels in the next book?
Yes, I think
the big question.
I will actually have squirrels in this one. Yes.
Okay.
Because
at some point you gotta pay off on the title, right?
So a lot of times people will say, "Are there squirrels in it? Is it a squirrel book?" Or kids will come up to me and say, "Are your books for kids?" And I say, "No, they're not."
No.
And then they grump away because they want kids books with squirrels. I got a friend who it's actually a friend that I dedicated this third book to, and their children so desperately want to read the squirrel books, but they're like 8 years old, and so
it's because your covers are so darn cute.
I know, they're so cute. And then about a lesbian vampire couple eating, whoever comes to their door.
Yeah, right. It could be a problem there. Thank you so much for coming back. What's going to happen with the next novel installment? Now that we talked about the shorts, what's the next novel coming out?
Next novel, so I have a whole bunch in the pipeline. So I also write under a pen name, doing more contemporary fiction, much more adult, I'll say. So the next will actually be a novel under my pen name that is a murder mystery thriller. So I have that about halfway drafted. So once that's done, I have a continuation to my trilogy that will take place about 6 years after the trilogy. I finally want to get back to Feybound, which is the couple from essentially Battle Creek, Michigan, going into the Fey world to get their dog back and saving their marriage in the process. I want to do a follow-up to Arcanum called, right now I'm just calling it Captain Drace, where Drace, the supporting character from Arcanum, becomes a sky pirate and of an airship. I don't really know what's going to happen there, but that's
sounds like you've got a lot in the cauldron bubbling up to come out next. That's awesome.
The follow-up to that will turn Arcanum into a trilogy, and the last one of that will be Venatus, which is a storyline that I've been hinting at a lot in my trilogy, and so that will help bridge Arcanum into the rest of my books and make it all one universe.
Fantastic. Anybody out there in listener land, if you want to learn more about Jamie's work, If you want to find out when the next book is coming, you might want to sign up for his newsletter because he lets everybody know all the fun stuff. And you can find a link to his website in the show notes. Jamie, thank you so much for coming back. And
Well, thank you
just
so much. It's always a pleasure.
keep writing so I can keep having you tell me stories, pretty please.
I will. I will.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great
Thank
summer.
you so much. Oh, you as well. Thank you.